Welcome to Power Talks with Santosh Shah. With this highlight episode, we complete the season 2 of Power Talks. The Ambassador of Malaysia to Nepal, His Excellency Dato Ilan Kovan Kolandavelu. Malaysia has become an influential nation in Asia today with its unique approach of economy and prosperity and fraternity. Sakyamuni Buddhist Foundation of Malaysia, and with your leadership as well, you've been pushing for the last 2 years with the Nepal government to develop Lumbini as a peace city, to invite millions of Buddhists from the world over. It's a $3 billion US project.
That's right.
How is it that project moving on?
Well, Sakyamuni Buddhist Foundation Malaysia is founded by a group of Malaysian Chinese who are Buddhists themselves. And they, together with AirAsia as a strategic partner, are very keen to develop Lumbini into an international peace city. Because if you look at other major religions, they all have developed their sacred cities. So Lumbini is one place, which is the birthplace of Buddha, has not been developed. There are about 150 million Buddhists within 1 to 5 hours flying time around Asia. Of course, there are 380 million Buddhists throughout the world, but in Asia alone, within 1 to 5 hours flying time, there are 150 million Buddhists. So just imagine, if you can bring in about 10% of that population annually, it's already 50 million people. So we are looking at Lumbini as a wholesale development. It's a package development. We are talking of clusters. We are talking of not only hotels, hotels from budget hotels to 3-star, 4-star, 5-star, and also other facilities, power, water, utilities, other utilities, and also the education institutions which are related to Buddhism, and also hospitals. Because I was told that many Buddhists would like to have their children born in Lumbini because the birthplace of Buddha is very significant.
The Lumbini Peace Project can actually change the face of the country.
That's right. Yeah.
It's a huge project, $3 billion investments with prospects of having 400 million Buddhists pilgrims visit Lumbini. Why does not our leaders, the leaders in the Nepal government, get the simple theory?
I really do not know, Santosh. Over almost a year, I've approached various levels of government, including the previous Prime Minister, But somehow, I do not know, we did not get any response at all. Probably the previous government was a caretaker government for almost 7 months. And also they were embroiled with their own political problems, So probably that's the reason. But now, I'm making my attempts to see the current Prime Minister, I think in Nepal, there's enough of political revolution, over a long political history. I think Nepal should now move into economic revolution. So I think probably Lumbini is the right project, to start off. Because Nepal is graced with the birthplace of Buddha, as Lumbini.
That will always stay like that.
It will stay like that, as you said. And I think the Sakyamuni Buddhist Foundation AirAsia has indicated to me getting the funds, international fund, is not a problem, But of course, the ball is in Nepal's court, the Nepal government's court,
Mr. Rajesh Hamal, Nepal's most celebrated movie star. Rajesh Hamal has acted in more than 250 films during the 25 years of golden times of Nepali cinema. One of the reasons why young people are entering into criminal gangs and causing havoc in the country is the increasing lawlessness in the entire country. As a result, people suffer a lot. When normally the people who cause this havoc, they create troubles for the common people, are portrayed as villains in your films. And normally you just beat them up and kill them in 2.5 hours and give justice to the people. In reality, we know that does not happen. But in case if it happens, how long time does it take for people to get justice?
That's how I think film and the reality differs, because in a film you can have this Messiah coming out, Superman coming out, and he says that, okay, I'll take care of everything, don't you worry, and he eventually does. But in real life, you cannot put all your eggs in one basket and think that this one single factor will be the determined factor to make things work in the society. I think it has to be a contribution coming in from all sections of the society, the youth, the experiences of the older generation, the vigor of the youth, and people working in different platforms and in different workforces. They all have to contribute in their own way, and that is how you make a sustainable and a strong nation and society. But unfortunately, in a country like ours, we are so now politically unstable and economically lacking behind in terms of, like we're in a 21st century where most of the countries are making progress by leaps and bounds, and we're sort of like still struggling with our politics, still struggling with the law of the country to be yet to be written.
Writing the new constitution could be the beginning of the solution of all these issues that we touched upon. But do you think we will get the new constitution drafted by the end of May?
It looks very bleak the way the things are going right now because, though it has become very cliche to say consensus, we should all get together and, reach sort of a compromise. We're saying all this, but that's the only way out, no matter how cliche or mundane it sounds or how repetitive it sounds. That is the only way. It's only through consensus, by compromising on a certain situation, that we're going to have a law of this country. Because, as you know, there are political parties with a political ideology that differs so much from one another. So if they all stick to their own political ideology and do not want to bulge an inch, then there is no way that you can have a common constitution that appeals to all spheres of the population. So I feel, and the way things are going right now, I do not see any consensus happening, because it's not only inter-party disturbances that they're having, it's also the intra-party things that they're going through. And no matter how sad or unencouraging it looks, it is the fact that we do not have a leader who is actually thinking about the entire nation and the entire population. They all have their vested interests.
His Excellency Hong Sung-mok, the Ambassador of Republic of Korea to Nepal. The achievements of Korea in the sectors of technology, security, economy and culture is known to the world. Korea's power and influence in the Asian region is gradually becoming indispensable. With the economic growth of Korea, it has become a leading country in terms of manufacturing. But the recent tsunami attack in Japan, which is a matter of sadness for the whole world, it seems that it has placed Korea in an advantageous position, as the political and business analysts say. How do you see this situation? As a tragedy or as a matter of advantage to your country?
Let me tell you what I was told when I was in Europe. I spent over 10 years of my life in Europe. In Europe, they fondly say when Germany catches cold, neighboring countries will cough. I think the same applies to Japan and Korea. If Japan catches cold, Korea cannot avoid coughing. In the traditional agricultural society, sometimes one man's meat is another man's poison. But in industrial society, everything is interconnected. For example, if a big company in Japan closed down, then component suppliers in Korea will have to close down, and vice versa. They are all interconnected. There is a national boundary, but in economy, we don't have that kind of national boundary. So I would say Japan's difficulty is Korea's difficulty as well. So I really hope Japan will come back to normal as soon as possible.
Korea and Nepal have something in common in terms of geographical location. Korea is situated among some power nations such as China, Japan, and Russia. But the way Korea has maintained its sovereignty and economy is pretty amazing. How can Nepal learn from Korea's examples in terms of positioning itself in between China and India?
Until pretty recently, there was animosity between Korea on one side, South Korea on one side, and China and Russia on the other side. But now we have overcome all these things, and Korea is on good terms with both China and Russia. And that is important. For Nepal, I would say instead of looking at India and China as threats, or how should I put it, elephants, you had better see it as your own market. So my advice would be try to make Nepal relevant both to India and China. And that is the way for Nepal to go.
His Excellency Scott H. DeLacy, the Ambassador of the United States of America to Nepal. America and Nepal are located on the opposite side of the globe. Yet in just 6 decades, Nepal has developed a strong bond of friendship with America. Recently you mentioned that Al-Qaeda and others have their hideouts in Nepal. Can you elaborate on that, and how does your government plan to deal with this?
I always like to be respectful of my host, so don't take this wrong, but that's not quite what I've said. We've never said Al-Qaeda has hideouts here. What we have said, and I don't think Al-Qaeda has anything to do with Nepal. There are terrorist groups, though, in the region, in South Asia, that recognize, and I think that see in Nepal the potential. You've got a 1,600-kilometer open border with India. Security, as we know, and the Terai was devastated. The police presence was devastated during the insurgency. Immigration controls are lax, and there are always issues there. So as a result, there's many vulnerabilities that could be exploited by terrorists. And this is what we've spoken to, and we have said that publicly, that we are concerned that terrorist elements may seek to exploit Nepal's territory to the detriment of others in the region, and also, I would say, to the detriment of Nepal. No country wants it.
Security mechanism which we have in the current state in Terai is near to a collapse. The presence of government, law and order is weakening day by day. Terai used to be a green belt for growing vegetables and food. Now they're growing cannabis and opium. Before Terai becomes a region of warlords like in Afghanistan, can we not look into the proverb, prevention is better than cure, for this neglected region?
This issue of drugs that you raised, Santosh, is something that I've been hearing more and more about since I've been here as well. On my first trip to the Terai about a year ago, when I was in Birganj, I started to hear about it. I have heard about it as I have traveled in other parts of the Terai, and it is an issue of concern to us. It is not yet a primary focus for us, or for any donor, and nor is it for the government, but I think that we need to be looking at this much more closely, to be honest. And I've talked with a lot of young people who are working in the Terai, many of whom are trying to address this issue and trying to get farmers to redirect their efforts and their resources, but it's also, you've got to find that combination of alternatives and enforcement of the laws as well. We're probably making progress that can move towards enforcement. We're working with the police and all the rest, all the security establishment. But we really do need to do a better job still of empowering the people with alternatives. And also, though, it seems to me it's giving them a stake in their nation. People who really believe in their country, who want Nepal to believe in Nepal and want it to prosper, aren't going to want to produce drugs.
His Excellency Thomas Gass, the Ambassador of Switzerland to Nepal. Switzerland is a dream destination for every tourist in the world. Switzerland is also a role model nation for many voters and electoral candidates in Nepal. Since Rana regime, even till today, we have been hearing often that people in power have stashed their money through corruption in Swiss banks. How real do you see this speculation?
The whole international culture about stashing away your money has evolved a lot in the last 10 to 15 years. Especially the OECD has placed a lot of pressure on certain jurisdictions to be more cooperative in terms of information about money in the banks. Now, for Switzerland, banking is a really important economic area, an important economic sector. And so for us, the privacy of the information, the privacy of the data that is related to the banking is really important. That is protected by our civil code, and basically the information about the money that you may have in our banks, that information belongs to you. It doesn't even belong to the owner of the bank. It doesn't belong to the state, to any state. Under certain conditions, of course, that information could be released, but it's not an information that is publicly available. Now, of course, for big financial centers, that poses certain risks, and this privacy of the banking information can be abused of, and can be abused of in crime and in money laundering.
So let's say the Anti-Corruption Commission of Nepal, which is CIAA, has to probe into an investigation to find out who has put their money abroad, earned through illegal means and through corruption. How will your government support this move taken by the Anti-Corruption Commission of Nepal?
Switzerland is actually very active in the fight against money laundering and cross-border financial crime. We are actively participating in the various international commissions that deal with that and that also establish rules and norms in that sector. This is a must for a country that wants to pride itself in its banking sector. It has to be active and has to be very disciplined, putting the onus also to some extent on the banks, agreeing to cooperate with other countries around the globe if there is a need for mutual assistance in the area of fighting crime related to the movement of finances. So if there is a request, a formal request, of course that those requests are responded to within the framework, of course, of our federal act on mutual assistance in crime. If you look at what happened in the recent past in North Africa, where a number of leaders,
the dictators,
a number of leaders there had their assets blocked quite quickly in Swiss banks, actually before many of the other countries did so.
So if Nepal's Anti-Corruption Commission has to look into it, to what extent of time length can we trace back?
That is difficult for me to answer now. What I could say, though, is that one of the aspects is that the onus has to come, of course, from Nepal. That it's important to establish how those funds were acquired by the person, and of course, there has to be some legal proceedings that have to take place here in Nepal before Switzerland can consider or entertain any kind of mutual assistance in this regard.
His Excellency Robert Piper, the head of the United Nations in Nepal. Peace process, constitution drafting, army integration, and citizenship issues are at deadlock, and Nepal's economic growth is at halt. We are facing the most difficult phase of Nepal's modern history. At this time of political crisis or leadership crisis, United Nations can have a very important role to play. In the last 3 years, we have heard several versions of the peace process, constitution drafting, lots of debate. But you are a person who have been in the center among the donor agencies, international agencies, United Nations, and the government of Nepal, including several political parties. How do you review, or how do you see the past, present, and future of the constitution drafting and the peace process of Nepal?
I always remind any visitor who's coming to understand Nepal that the scale of the ambition that is going on here, and you've got to really respect that. I mean, the issues that are up for transformation that are spelled out in the peace agreement are truly profound, deep, long-term structural issues. So I think the first thing you've got to appreciate the time scale involved. I look back at the 3 years I've been here, and I see a lot of things to be very optimistic about. I see a CA that is so much more representative than anything that came before it. I see political leaders of every shade that are talking to each other constantly, and of course you can criticize them for talking too much, but there's a lot of post-conflict environments where you can't take that as a given that people, those channels are remaining so open. Even if there is distrust, there's elements of respect and communication which are absolutely crucial for building peace. I see a republic declared peacefully. You know, I see a lot of very sensitive issues that are hard, you know, closely held to people's hearts in many communities. These things are in question, they're being changed, their discussions and assumptions are being questioned, and that is being done peacefully. And you've got to kind of give full marks to the state, for the nation, if you will, for managing such sensitive issues so effectively. Looking ahead, you know, one has to hope that everything will continue in such a sort of positive way. One also has to hope that the pace of change, of course, will accelerate. That's something that all Nepalis feel, and they're not alone. I think the international community wants to see a greater speed in this transition. But as they say, I think an ex-president once said, hope is not a plan. So it's not enough just to hope that things go well and cross your fingers, but also, you know, it would be great to see a little bit more of a plan laid out, even if that plan gets changed as midway. But I have to say the issues that are laid out in the peace agreement are fairly clear, but it isn't very obvious what is the strategy to get to some of these things. What's the strategy on rule of law? What's the strategy on social inclusion? And it isn't easy to find people, frankly, to talk about these issues in government. So as I look forward, I'm looking for a plan, if you will, to make sure that this transition ends up in the right end point.
Honorable Nilkantha Upreti, the Chief Election Commissioner of Nepal. The Election Commission is the backbone of a country's democracy. Since a century now, the people of Nepal have strived to establish democracy and have succeeded in doing so. The results of the first year of the Constitution Assembly is really noteworthy. But if we look at the second year, it does not meet the people's aspiration, as the CA members failed to deliver the Constitution on time, and rather they even extended it 2 times. How long can the CA members continue extending their own tenure, because they hold the voting rights?
And the provision of Constitution, I couldn't see anything except one Constituent Assembly elections in the history of Nepal. We should be able to produce the member of Constituent Assembly who should be writing Constitution for the people of this country and giving to the people. They are the representative of the people. That is what I can understand. And one thing I should mention, without shying away, and is that we were overly, I should say, unrealistically optimistic
and ambitious as well,
to set time for writing Constitution. We were encouraged because of the peace process we were driving on our own, was successfully moving ahead, and we were excited, and we thought that 2 years will be more than sufficient to write new Constitution in the environment we were in, and that was, I think, unrealistic, and that may have had the problem in thinking of the time frame for writing Constitution in the first place. So the extension of the CA for until the new Constitution comes, it is completely the right of the CA members and also the provision of the Constitution, if Constitution gives you, to extend and continue for indefinite period. It may be.
The people are getting impatient and they're getting very frustrated. There is a lot of anger mounting in the general population of the country. If there is a third extension, I fear that people may resort to streets, maybe even in a violent way. But in that scenario, cannot any permanent body in the governance, like the President's office or the Supreme Court or your office, the Election Commission itself, intervene before that happens and prevent a huge catastrophe?
Let me tell about my commission. The Election Commission of Nepal doesn't possess the prerogative of taking or intervening the situation. We are responsible constitutional body for making credible elections in this country. We are ready for that. Any election that comes tomorrow, we are preparing for that. With regards to taking or intervening in the process of writing constitution by some other constitutional body, it is, I think, not my area of comments. I should not be speaking on that particularly because I, being a head of constitutional body of the constitutions, and I have my own restrictions. So, Santosh Babu, I cannot say whether it has to be led to that direction or we have to wait until we write a new constitution and extend the time frame of the CA.
We had a short and a wonderful journey during the last 2 months. We'll be back soon with the season 3 of Power Talks. Until then, good luck, goodbye, and have a great life.